Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm Laura Blackwell, tonight's host. My co-host, Daniel Marcus, is the founder of Story Hour. He started it coming up on 2 years now ago, it turns out. And we've just been back here pretty much every Wednesday to hear some great stories from some wonderful writers. And this is the first Year of the Tiger broadcast from Story Hour. And so we brought in two ferociously great writers. And tonight we have Phoebe Barton and Zin E. Rocklyn. Tonight we're going to be reading for Brave Space Alliance. Brave Space Alliance is a vehicle to empower and elevate queer and trans voices, particularly those belonging to people of color, to allow our communities a seat at the table on key decision-making processes that impact the community of Chicago. BSA provides educational and access-based programming to provide community members with what is needed to survive and thrive. All programming, services, and resources are intended for, I never know if I should say BIPOC or BIPOC.
BIPOC's cool.
Okay, I'll say BIPOC then, thank you. Trans and gender non-conforming individuals. You can learn more at bravespacealliance.org. If you're here on Zoom, feel free to leave your camera on. It can be nice for our readers to see your wonderful faces, and chime in on the text chat if you like. We can be pretty chatty there. If you're on Facebook, thank you so much, and chat all you like, but please understand that we may not be there with you in the moment. We'll be with you in spirit though. Our first reader tonight is Phoebe Barton. Phoebe Barton is a queer trans science fiction writer. Her short fiction has appeared in venues such as Analog, Lightspeed, and Kaleidotrope, and she wrote the Nebula Award finalist interactive fiction game, The Luminous Underground. She is a 2019 graduate of the Clarion West Writers Workshop and lives with a robot in the sky above Toronto. Phoebe, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure.
All right, so I'm going to be reading from my story, The Ghosts of Liberty Street, which appeared in this book. It gets even better, Stories of Queer Possibility, which is available like this and also in ebook. And do just want to let everyone know that these are the content warnings from the book of mention of transphobia, perceived mortal peril, and description of hypothetical bomb shelter use/death.
Thank you.
When you told me about the half-there train you saw whispering down the grassy shoulder next to the interstate, I didn't know what to think. All these years, all these experiences, and I've still never been able to parse the whole map of you. You're a subway with more lines that can be counted and more stations that can be visited. So much of you is hidden from view. There's another one, you say, pointing down the median, coming out of the tunnel, yellow with 3 green stripes, like the one we saw in San Francisco. That's what they'd look like, right? I shield my eyes with my hand and look, but there's only grass stirred by gusts of wind kicked up by passing cars. I can't remember if they ever laid tracks out here, but if so, they're long gone. There's nothing to see, and I tell you so. Calling me a liar, are you? You say, and stick out your tongue playfully. I respond in kind and wrap my fingers around yours. It's not that I don't want to see what you see. You've given me far too much for that. Through all the painful moments of my transition, on all those days I hid myself away in the washroom and cried until I thought the room would flood, on all the days nobody but you looked at me and saw a woman, you were there even when you weren't. Maybe it's the sun, I say. We could come back later. Sounds great. You grin and peck my cheek. The warmth of your lipstick lingers and I can't bear to wipe it off. Not after everything I've made you go through. I was worried you weren't going to be adventurous after all. For me, learning that Cincinnati has a subway was a revelation, an explosion of possibility, and a reminder of how some things don't work out. 100 years ago, streetcars weren't quite the hot new thing anymore, but plenty of cities were built around rails and trolley poles. Cincinnati decided to solve its problems by building a subway underneath downtown, digging until the money dried up and the bottom fell out. Depressions, wars, chaos. Through all of it, the subway was down there waiting to be put to use, only getting bare minimal maintenance to keep it all from coming apart. Neglected, dark, and practically forgotten. Didn't have to happen that way, sure, but that's how it happened here. The interstate's less busy at night, but not by much. At least the old tunnel opens out onto the right side of it, with cars driving past and away. No headlights reveal us as we sneak to the big unmarked gray doors weighed down with 80 years of rust. I test the door and it creaks open. I could close it right now and walk away. I know you'd follow me. I know it'd disappoint you too. So I bow and gesture to the darkness. After you. You give me a wicked smile and dart in. I take a last furtive glance around for cameras or cops before I follow you. So much more peaceful in here, isn't it? You say. My kind of place. You've already got your flashlight on. It's the only light in the tunnel. Mine isn't nearly as powerful, but it's enough to illuminate my steps. I cast the beam around, slicing through air full of scattered dust, and let it linger on the graffiti. The walls here are encrusted with tags from visitors, explorers, and wanderers. Some go back decades. We're walking where the rails would have been. Their absence is the only indication so far that the work was never finished. If I squint, I can almost see their ghosts. It would be so much brighter in here if they could reflect my light. Such a shame, I say, such a mess. Hang on. You stop, kneel down, put a hand to your ear. One's coming, get off to the side. The tunnel is wide enough for 2 tracks, separated by concrete supports. You climb between them. I stay. What's coming? I ask, but you're gone. Just as you make the far tunnel, I feel a faint lick of wind brush the back of my neck. I spin around, drown the tunnel in my light, but there's nothing and no one. Whoa, are you okay? You dart back to me, thread your fingers between mine and squeeze. That was close. You felt it, didn't you? Okay. It's an old tunnel, and there are vents. There's no reason there wouldn't be drafts. It's wind. You're going to have to pay closer attention than that, you say. You smile at me, but after so much practice, I can read the sadness on your lips. There's still plenty to see. Exploring the subway was my idea. You've never been into the nuts and bolts of transit systems like I am. You'd never fly to another city just to ride around on its rails. But you love seeing new things and you love me, and that's enough. Don't worry about a thing, you said. As far as I'm concerned, it'll be amazing. I trusted you. I trust you. So I led you into the dark, hoping I wouldn't lead you wrong. I see my first stranger when we walk into Brighton Place, the first empty station. I'd known there was always a chance we wouldn't be alone in the subway, not with the unlocked door so inviting. You brought your second favorite knife, and I had a canister of bear spray, just in case we found ourselves in a situation we couldn't talk our way out of. I didn't like having to bring them, but in a tunnel, there aren't many places to run. The stranger waits at the edge of the platform, not dressed like an explorer at all. No pack, no cameras, nothing. In fact, they look like they're wearing a suit, dark and sharply cut. I blink and they're gone. I clamber up to the platform, but it's empty. The layers of graffiti are covered in more layers of dust. There's no sound but our breathing, even though there's a parkway on the other side of the ceiling. Hey, I whisper, as if anything louder would disturb the station, would make it obvious we've been there, would make it impossible for me to avoid the cops on our way out. I tighten my grip on your hand as if I'd lose my way without you, even though there are only 2 directions to go down here. Did you? Before you can answer, there's another lick of wind. I blink and I see the stranger again and more besides, but only through one eye. The other sees the dark platform, empty, quiet, abandoned. The impression of something big, heavy, and long rolls in. I see faint windows, a yellow body, and 3 green stripes. What? I breathe as it moves on the way we came. There's another touch of wind against a handful of stubborn hairs on my arm that endured all those laser sessions, all that electrolysis. I can feel pinpricks in every place where the hair won't grow anymore. That was a possibility, you say, and you kiss me. On the lips this time, soft and warm. I was getting worried. There's hope for you after all, looks like. We linger on the platform, taking in the unbreathed air and undisturbed dust and all the graffiti left by everyone who came before us. When I feel the wind again, I take picture after picture. But the camera only sees what's there, abandonment and emptiness. The day I told you the truth, my blood flowed like plastic and the air turned to ice in my lungs. We've been together for so long already, but I was sure that those few words would flip your magnet around, that we'd suddenly have 2 North Poles trying to attract and only being pushed apart. I spent weeks agonizing in my head, unwilling to trust anyone with a fact of myself, wondering if it'd be worth it to lock that fact in a chest and tie it in iron chains and drop it into the deepest part of the ocean so I wouldn't have to risk losing you. My life was a tunnel then, even if I didn't realize it. There was only one path forward. It was a cloudless blue day outside when I told you. Back on the day I found that fear cast shadows deeper and darker than any storm cloud. I'm trans, I said. I made sure to say it while we were walking, so the wind would carry it away. I said it so that we could carry it together, because I couldn't bear its weight alone anymore. Your eyes glimmered, and you didn't miss a step. Hi, trans, you said with a curving smile. I'm the girl who loves you. For the subway's second station, all that's left is a name, Lynn Street. The station itself is gone, sealed off behind concrete walls, and only the lips of the platforms betray that it was ever there at all. Did they fill in the whole station with concrete, I wonder? If not, it must be the only place in the subway without graffiti. The tags are thinning out the further we go along the tunnel, but not by much. Plenty of people have come this way before. Maybe you stopped to examine a particularly artistic piece of graffiti and I didn't notice. Maybe I was just walking too fast. However it happened, our hands slipped out of each other's and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I saw the ghost of solid earth filling the tunnel because there was no tunnel. There were so many possibilities where it was never dug at all. Just like there were so many chances for me to never meet you. All those unlikely choices that led to us here together pressed down on me with the weight of 1,000 tons of dirt. My tears are November mud, dirty and cold. It was all so close to never happening. I'm choking, I'm alone, I'll never be found and I'll die in darkness. All this goes through my head in an instant. I know that it's what life without you would feel like, entombed. Then I feel your hand and I can breathe again. I can move again. The tunnel is a tunnel again, full of dusty air and empty of ground. You okay, you ask? Your brows furrowed in worry and concern, as if things are accelerating beyond what you expected. You saw it, didn't you? What was that? It shouldn't have been anything. I couldn't. A glimpse of another possibility, you say. You get used to it. It's the first time I've known you to lie. For the first few weeks after I came out to you, I was alert and on guard for anything. I'm sorry for that now, but at the time, it was the only way I could think of to make sure I was safe, to catch any sign of differences, of things changing while there was still enough time to act. I'm not sure what I could ever have done. It was a sort of vigilance that drained the life out of me, that replaced happiness with fear, that made keeping the life I had my only goal. It's a sort of vigilance that warps people. Without you, it would have twisted me into an unrecognizable shape. When fear transforms, it isn't pretty. And once its shape is set, it might never be broken. It's a lucky thing that the station at Liberty Street was never used, because it would have meant that Cincinnati was ash. Planners at the height of the Cold War didn't need to think hard about the possible uses of underground chambers beneath cities. If the sirens had roared, a few handfuls of people, maybe they'd even think of themselves as lucky at first, would have hurried down here to wait for the bombs. I heard about what it was like here, you say, squeezing my hand. I didn't think it would creep me out so much. Living in a world like this, it's just... The supplies are long since gone, but the metal bed frames remain. Through one eye, I see them old, rusted, empty. Through the other, I see half their mattresses, thin sheets fiberglass smooth, and people waiting to die. Some shout and cry, some try to fight in silence, and some only shiver. Some are already dead, but the others haven't noticed yet. They're all together, filling the station, and they're all dying alone. It's a good thing the stairs to the surface are shuttered. I'm sure if I could walk up there, I'd see the city half annihilated. I look at the way you're biting your tongue, and I know you see it too. I still don't understand, I say. How is this possible? It was more possible than anyone wants to believe, you say. It's so easy for things to fall apart, to leave you gasping, alone. Sometimes tunnels end like that. I imagine you and me on those beds, unable to find each other's hands, our breaths slowly shallowing. I can feel it, my DNA unwinding and my organs liquefying as radiation poisons me. It feels worse than being buried did. At least then I knew I was alone. I still remember our first fight, our only fight. I tell myself that it was all my fault because I can't bear to blame you, because I couldn't be the person you needed me to be. I'm sorry, I said the night before, drawing away from you, pulling the covers close. I wanted to lick my lips, but I couldn't, not after where they'd been. They were coated with radioactive poison. I can't. You must have stewed on it all night because the next morning you were raw and boiling. That was the worst of it. I thought I could overcome my repulsion, not what I felt for you would let me perform, but I was overwhelmed. You didn't understand. I still don't blame you. Society wants you to think of sex as natural, wants you to not understand. It was like you thought I was disgusting, you said, like I was slime. I let you shout. I was terrified then and still am now that the slightest interruption, the smallest bump, will flip a pull and push you away. It doesn't matter what we fought about. The critical thing is that we fought. Most of the words were yours. I knew that every syllable I threw back at you would be a nail in my tongue. I let you flare like the bombs that ended the world above Liberty Street and waited for your fury to settle. It was the only thing that felt safe. Safe for me, that is, and that's the problem. It was all my fault that I took something wonderful and turned it into sandpaper. I don't know if you've forgotten. I hope you have, but I never will. The prospect of watching you walk out of my life, your last impression of me being frustration and anger, was a knife pressed against my neck. Cold and jagged. It would only have taken a little, so little. We found ways to make it work. I started to see understanding in your eyes. I only later stopped to wonder if you'd have been better off without me. The fourth and last station, Race Street, was to have been the hub of Cincinnati subway. From here, trains would fan out across the city, rumbling down tunnels and through portals and along streets. All I can see is an empty hull that's as dead as the rest of them. The graffiti here is thin. It's a 2-mile walk back to the door. The edges between possibilities are thin here too. I can see ghostly trains with both eyes, yellow with 3 green stripes. Everywhere I swing my light, there's cold and dusty concrete and bright and open platforms full of people. I wonder if they can see me too, the ghost of a girl caught between who she was and who she's becoming. End of the line, you say. We made it. Beautiful, I say. Even the abandoned version of it is. The station feels wide and open and not at all like a ruin. It puts me in the mind of stations the Romans might have built if they'd had subways. It would have been something. There's always a chance, you say. Come on, let's take a look around. As the hub station, there's more to explore than just rough platforms cut into the tunnel walls. There are corridors that should have had spots for buskers, cafe kiosks for people running late, racks full of free daily newspapers and brightly colored murals. Where they would have connected to the surface, there are walls and ceilings. The world above has done its best to pretend this place doesn't exist, just like it's done with people like me. After so long underground, my throat's caked with dust. All those possibilities you've been seeing, I say, uncertainly, clasping your hand tight. How many of them do you see us in? You stop, turn to me, kiss me on the cheek. It's not as firm as I remember. We were always a long shot, you say. I tighten my grip on your hand, but you feel only half there. We find an underpass, but there's no telling where it was meant to have led. There's a concrete wall cutting it in half, but you lead me toward it anyway, splashing through a puddle of water. There's something magical in imagining where it could have gone, what might be on the other side, even though I know there's only more dusty concrete, more unrealized possibilities. The best risks are always long shots, you say. That's how people work. You reach out for the wall, brushing your fingers against it, and you push through. Of course you can push through. You're only half there. You turn to me, smile, and take another step forward. I see you pass through the wall. I feel my fingers meet the rough concrete. I watch your hand slip out of mine. I pound my fists against it, but the wall refuses to be anything but a wall. You've stepped through the wall, and I'm alone, abandoned in the darkness at the end of the tunnel, knowing it's where I was always heading. I sink to my knees, shuddering, and call your name through my gathering tears again and again. I can't make that long walk without you. I can't face the night or the day without you. I wail louder than deformed train wheels shrieking against smooth rails, begging you to come back. I snap my light off and let myself be swallowed by the darkness. There's no monster in the tunnel that can do any worse. It's enough for me to see a trickle of light. At first, I can't tell where it's coming from until I realize it's the light on the other side of the wall. Please, I whisper, don't leave me like this. I hit the wall again, except this time I don't. I reach through it and find your arm. I pull your head back through the concrete, back to reality. This might be your last chance, you say. It's hard getting through. I think of the empty stations we've seen. I think of the sandpaper world outside. I think of all the possibilities that could have been but never will, not in this tunnel. I fall through the wall with you. I refuse to let go. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. That was very poignant, really beautiful. We like to take a breath between the stories. Sometimes I really need it. All right, I'm okay now. Our next reader is Zin E. Rocklyn. Of Trinidadian descent, Zin E. Rocklyn is a horror and dark fantasy author hailing from Jersey City, New Jersey. A contributor to several anthologies, including a nonfiction essay in the Hugo Award-winning Uncanny Magazine's Disabled People Destroy Science Fiction. The Ignite Award-nominated writer is a graduate of the 2017 VONA and 2018 Viable Paradise workshops. Their debut novella, Flowers for the Sea, was published by Tor.com in October 2021, and you can follow them on Twitter at Intelligent Twat, one word. Zin, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure.
All right. So I guess I'll jump right in.
What's your content warnings if you have any?
Yes, I do have content warnings for implied racism and character death off screen. So
Thank you.
no problem. I'll be reading my story, When a Kaiju Falls in Love, which was featured in, I don't have the book with me, but you can imagine it. Kaiju, sorry, I'm blanking. But it's Outland Entertainment released Kaiju 2, Reign of Monsters. And so it's an excellent, excellent collection. I definitely recommend everybody get it. So this is When a Kaiju Falls in Love. Black Lives Matter, say her name. Black Lives Matter, say their name. Gertie snorted and shifted her weight from one swollen foot to the other while arching her back to pop that sweet spot just above her dimples. The position was getting harder to keep the older she got, but this window was her newscast night after night, the program running for the last 63 years. She'd watched this neighborhood be built up by Black and brown hands, only for it to be systemically dismantled by invisible pale ones. Still, they tried, including her parents and later on her, but nothing changed. Nothing until more than a few bad loans gutted out the souls of some pre-war brownstones, leaving them vulnerable to the claws of predatory real estate and new money. A few people held on tight, those lucky enough to breed generations of money knowledge, of legacy wealth, no matter how little it may have been. But the neighborhood was changing yet again, turning over to whiter shade of pale in victimhood. More of that pale in the form of soft-handed fists stabbed the air. Black Lives Matter, say his name. What's the matter, Grammy? Mad you can't be down there? Nettie asked Nettie asked from her perch in the next window over. She'd been a little smarter, having dragged a chair to the spot. Her view was slightly obstructed by the lip of the windowsill, but at least her back didn't ache. Gertie rolled her eyes at her granddaughter's familiar tone, though the corner of her mouth upticked a bit. You should be marching for all of us, she shot back, just as sarcastic. Please, our lives don't matter enough for them to stop taking over the goddamn place, Gertie's daughter interjected as she shuffled into the living room. Angela plopped onto the couch and groaned as she pulled off her heels. What'd I tell you about that mouth of yours, Angie? Gertie grumbled. And I told you I get it from my mama, so how about that? All three women chuckled and sighed, shifting in mirroring ways. Silence briefly chilled the room as Angela let her head fall back against the couch cushions. What's for dinner? Nettie asked as her eyes trailed the last of the pathetically drawn crowd. All 15 white people rounded the corner, half a block down, police escorts lazily flowing behind. Whatever your grandmother made, Angela mumbled sleepily. Leftovers, he said. She'd have to stand in a moment, and the prospect made her tired. Oh, Grammy, Nettie whined playfully. She stood up in the chair and twisted her back this way and that, mimicking her grandmother like she had since she was a child, while also releasing the anger that clenched her belly. Shut your ass up, little girl, and eat what's heated up for you. Gertie groaned as she stayed straightened up. Oh, good Lord, heal this fucking back. Immediately, Nettie launched into a censored version of the rap ballad, twerking her waist and popping her chest. She get it from her mama. Being the only one to get the reference, Angela busted out laughing, now wide awake with hunger and love. Gertie shook her head, shuffling from the room with a grin she hid from her daughter and granddaughter as the nerves of the night ahead tickled her chest. Howard walked in just in time for the table to be set, while Nettie's twin brother Hannibal miraculously managed to avoid contributing anything but his after-practice body odor, sending Angela into a frenzy. Go wash up, ruining my damn appetite. In retaliation, Hannibal swept his mother up into a bear hug, briefly lifting her from the ground and set her right back down when the scream hit fever pitch. Damn, Mom, the neighbors are gonna call the cops. Angela sucked her teeth and fidgeted with the oven. Please, this building ain't that white yet. They waited until Hannibal exited the shower before dishing the food, and by the time they sat down to eat, Hannibal was joining them along with his cell phone. Put that damn thing away, Angela muttered in between bites of baked chicken. I was just checking for funeral arrangements, Hannibal explained, though he did darken the screen and plant the device face down towards the middle of the table. Nettie shifted, her eyes on her plate, and as the middle prongs of her forks toyed with her food. You okay, Matilda? Howard asked, his deep voice softened by genuine concern. Nettie winced at her full name being spoken. Her nickname eased the sting a bit, but she still hated the old sound of either of the monikers she was given. Yes, Daddy, she said, her eyes not meeting his. She knew the moment she did look at her father, her resolve would crumble. Did y'all know her well? Gertie asked. Nettie automatically sighed, her fears being realized, although she was sure both her responses hadn't helped the possibility of avoiding the subject. Nah, Hannibal answered for her. She dropped out like a year ago when she got pregnant. Nettie lifted her shoulder. I had class with her in 6th grade. She paused, pushing her green beans to one side of the plate. She was a bitch. Betty, Natilda Denise Anderson. Ooh, Natilda, you don't speak ill of the dead, baby, Gertie said with a sigh. And you damn sure don't talk like that at the dinner table, Angela added. I'm sorry, but she was, Nettie whined. I'm not saying she desired to die or anything, especially like that, Hannibal said, shaking his head. 32 bullets, 3 alone to the dome, and she was some kind of beast. Stillness rushed the room as everyone nervously scraped at their plates, eyes glued to food that now tasted like cardboard. The butterflies Nettie had been fostering were now taking full flight, obliterating the appetite for the courtesy bites she'd been taking. They're going to find him, Daddy, she said, her voice smaller than her 16 years. It's only a matter of time. Forks clattered against Corningware, and several sighs went off as Nettie kept her gaze down, another regret of the night. She should have waited until she and Howard were alone, but she'd been worried about this for some months now, ever since that white couple bought the old trap house 3 blocks over on Harrison, right in the middle of a territory battle. Everyone and everything paused, the gravity of gentrification weaving its way into the bloody fabric of the city's most notorious neighborhood. It was like watching a white dude jog his baby through the center of a gunfight, not one bullet touching him or his towelhead progeny, AirPods blocking out the screams and shots. Finish your plate, Howard said, his tone not much changed from the last time he spoke. I have something for you to deliver. Nettie wasn't allowed to go anywhere near her father's study until the kitchen and dining room were spotless. So she and her brother decided to put on the best of Aretha Franklin and set to work. It was easy enough, nothing like Sunday dinner cleanup, but Angela had let them slip the last couple of nights by allowing them to do the minimum. Now sweeping, scrubbing the countertops and the table and the stove, and wipe out of the oven were required. It hadn't been lost on either of them that Angela was also delaying the inevitable. Everyone was on edge, and it had begun long before the murder of 17-year-old Estelle Dubois at the hands of the city's finest. Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Sandra Bland, Khalif Browder, Akai Gurley. The hashtags and the bodies attached to them were no strangers to their city. They held their own protests, ran their own programs, built their own safe houses against gun violence, gang initiations, and drug addiction, all funded from their own pockets. But none of it mattered to outside optics. The housing collapse meant most programs collapsed too. Employment was Unemployment was on the rise, but it was too late for their homes. Oh, sorry, employment was on the rise, but it was too late for their homes. The entire city was ready to explode, and explode it could, had they just given the word. But that would have been selfish, would have called for the wielding of indiscriminate power none of them could handle nor recover from. It was best to hold on as best as they could without losing their minds. And so deliveries like the one Howard was about to give his daughter were necessary. She'd been doing runs like this ever since she was a child, usually at Howard's side, and then since last year alone. The family hadn't been too happy about it, but Nettie insisted she was protected, and not just by the neighborhood itself. He knows when I'm coming, Nettie said dreamily after one of Angela's tisk-filled scoldings. And everyone knows where I'm going, so nobody messes with me. She tried to hide it, that wistfulness, but it had been hard, especially after spending hours at the rocky shore with him. Howard blinked at his daughter, not quite grasping the situation. He discussed it later that morning with Angela, and she popped a laugh in response. At least she won't walk up in this house pregnant. They both stopped and looked at one another, faces contorting as they tried to imagine the impossible. Never say some shit like that again, Howard said, shaking his head. Yeah, I'm kind of mad at myself for that one, Angela agreed. Daddy, you got a package? Nettie said from the door, snapping Howard from his reverie. Yes, baby girl, come in, he said, straightening his posture as the study door slid open. Nettie slipped inside as if sneaking in, her powdery body slithering through the opening wide enough for her alone. She slid the door shut behind her, careful of the squealing wheels and loud catch awaiting connection. She'd been doing this since she was a little girl, when she couldn't sleep and wanted to assist in her father's projects. He worked as a data processing manager at the telecommunications giant that at one point had over half the neighborhood employed. By the grace of his ever adaptability, Howard survived 6 major layoff seasons over the last 10 years, but even he knew he was running on borrowed time. Isn't it too early? Nettie asked excitedly. It seemed she hardly cared for the answer, but was trying not to be super eager to get out and be on her way to visit her paramour. It was such a strange thought, but it was clear his daughter was in puppy love. Obviously, she'd grow out of it as soon as she realized the extent of their relationship could only go so far. She was still young. The practicality of a partnership had yet to befall her as a challenge. Until then, until college and a career, he'd allow this, whatever it was. He'd keep Angela at bay and allow his baby girl some happiness, wherever she could find it, especially on a night like tonight. No, it's not, he finally said as she sat down in her favorite seat, the rocking chair where her mother had nursed her, both she and Hannibal, until they all fell asleep. Nettie never wanted to be too far from her father from the time she was born. Angela swore it was even before that. She blamed him for having to be put on bed rest. Nettie wouldn't stand for Angela going to work and being away from her father's scent. Howard thought the both of them ridiculous, but secretly adored the idea of both his girls being close always. With the neighborhood upset, Sister Yulin thought we should head off any issues by being proactive. Keep him distracted, Nettie said. Howard smirked. Yeah. Nettie shrugged. What am I bringing? More parts. Our boy likes puzzles. Nettie grinned. Yeah, he does. Howard tilted his head at his daughter, as his daughter gazed at nothing, her eyes glossy and her smile serene. What do y'all do when you're there, Nettie? Nettie's head snapped up then, her body going rigid as she stared wide-eyed at her father. Do y'all talk? How can y'all talk? Her smile was small, accidental, but warm. Well, remember how obsessed I was with radio waves, sonar responses, shit like that? Howard narrowed his eyes and Nettie shrugged. Sorry, but yeah, I mean, we started out with Morse code. Gramps would be proud. Another shy smile. The stained mahogany of her skin flushing red. I hope so. Well, yeah, so one night I was tinkering around and came up with a device that combines, and this is where Howard lost his daughter. Antiquated communications had been the foundation of his career, but with quickly advancing technology, he was bound to forget the details and nuances of the old. Zoning out of unnecessary inter- Zoning out unnecessary information had become his specialty since becoming a father. And that's that, Nettie announced proudly. A twinge of guilt made Howard wince. She was obviously sure her efforts would make him proud, and proud he was, but heaven forbid she asked him for advice. Well, damn, Nettie, he said, hoping he sounded as honored as he actually was. Then y'all will have a field day with this old junk. They're cleaning out Gibson's place. Nettie shifted, and Howard struggled to move on for a moment. Jedediah Gibson had been a relic on their block, the example of refusing to be strong armed out of his brownstone. But they'd all known one day he'd be gone, and having no living relatives, the house would be sold out of their hands. Howard cleared his throat. You know he was in the Korean War? Nettie smiled softly. Yeah, Dad. We talked about it sometimes. Howard nodded. Of course they did. Nettie had a knack for getting along with even the most cantankerous of elders. They adored her, or at the very least grunted a little softer at her when she passed by with her friends. Well, did he show you this? Nettie tried not to run, she really did, but two factors kept her pace just above cool, calm, collected. The equipment she carried and her destination. She waved off a few friends, dodged more hugs, and cut off several starts to long conversations she couldn't pretend to be interested in. That was until spotted her. Hey, girl, where you rushing to? He called from his perch against the 6-month-old BMW. He was due for an upgrade in about another two. The nickname wasn't from his alleged occupation, but a joke at birth about his partial albinism, which turned into affection as he grew older. Nettie rolled her eyes and kept her pace, but turned and said, You know where I'm going. Don't play dumb. Several of his boys, their friends, cracked up laughing, exaggerating the impact of her comeback. Nettie snorted and shook her head, her mission renewed as she sidestepped a small group of Snow's employees. They all nodded her way, and she nodded back with a small smile, throwing the youngest of the set a wink. Damn, Tilly, you in a rush? Snow said, suddenly appearing at her side. Snow was one of the few people to call her Tilly, a slight upgrade from Tilda he used to throw her way back in 7th grade. When he realized just why she was ignoring him till he was born. You and your light-skinned tendencies, Nettie snapped back. You always gotta know where I'm going, all up in my face. She palmed her own face, twisting her neck. Chill out, Drake, and let me live. All right, you got jokes tonight, Snow said, keeping pace. It was easy, being 6'4" against her 5'9" stride. Where your twin at? In his skin, Nettie said with a snort. What do you want, Snow? She stopped walking so suddenly, Snow progressed another 6 feet before realizing. When he turned to her, her pointer finger was an inch from his eye. You better not be talking to him about pushing shit, you hear me? Snow put up his hands in mock surrender. Nah, nothing like that, Ma. Just want to confirm if y'all gonna go to the protest, that's it. She narrowed her gaze at him, deciding whether she should scold him again for calling her Ma. She hated that term, and Tilly had been their compromise for it. But it was clear she was making him nervous, so she backed off. Yeah, we'll be there, she said softly, turning on her heel and resuming her walk towards the bay. Snow fell in step beside her. He liked to think he was keeping her safe this way, even sometimes had her call him if she felt nervous walking back. She rarely did. You see that whack-ass Chad and Becky march earlier? Snow busted out laughing. Yeah, we all did. Whack as fuck, man. They always gotta take over. Don't never think about talking to us first. Because they don't actually think about us, Nettie mumbled back. True. They walked another 3 blocks in comfortable silence, each of them briefly greeting associates along the way. Half a block from the abandoned lot that would take Nettie to her meeting place, Snow slowed down, nervously eyeing the shoreline. Nettie smirked as she turned to him. You scared? Shut up, Tilly, Snow grumbled, still not looking at her. That motherfucker eyed me kind of hard last time. You were kind of rowdy last time, Nettie said, fidgeting as they stood. His hearing is sensitive. She really wanted to sprint the last 1,000 feet to the rocky shoreline, though it would be necessary. He wasn't there yet. Look, I know you can't stand it when I get up all in your face, but call me when y'all are done, no matter what time, Snow said quickly, his eyes darting everywhere around them. These white people are making me nervous. Nettie nodded, not having the heart to even joke about his justified paranoia. They were going to have to discuss this wave of change, all of them, including him. Relocation was going to be nearly impossible, but something was going to have to be figured out before he was by the wrong people. All right, I will, she said. Snow smirked at her. Do you even have your phone? Nettie patted her pockets, then the small tote bag at her side. The faint glow lit up one corner of the canvas, and Snow chortled. Yeah, I got it. Surprised with your old ass. That shit a flip? Fuck you, Snow, Nettie said through a chuckle of her own. All right, stay up, Tilly, he said, sobering again, beginning his walk backwards. I'm gonna watch you till he gets here. Behind him, the rustle of the wave, larger than most, disturbed the darkness. Nettie smirked. I'll see you later, Snow. Snow nodded his acknowledgement, his pale cheeks rosying before he turned away, practically jogging back towards home. They were called communicators. Each family had one, and the responsibility skipped from block to block within the 3-mile radius of each new generation. No one really knew how far back it had gone, but it was the duty most willingly accepted. Hannibal was supposed to be the next, but while introductions had been tossed around at a safe distance from the shore, little Matilda waddled away towards the funny-looking mound making all those bubbles in the water. And look at this, Nettie exclaimed excitedly as she pulled out another long male-to-male cord, thickly braided with bungee line. I haven't seen this in years. The night sky was crystal clear. City lights polluted the darkness, but the gutted factories surrounding them provided enough privacy and enough cover to dim the amber radiance of his gaze. Most of his body stayed below waterline. Only the rough surface of his elongated head, the serpentine eyes, and the gaping abyss of his nostrils graced the air. Nettie guessed him to be lying on his belly at that point, not unlike his evolutionary cousins with short arms keeping him in place. The freighter truck-sized talons on his toes freighter truck-sized talons on his toes would be dug deep into the bedrock under the city, his tail stretching like an incomplete bridge to the mainland they were just outside of, about 6 miles away. He was small for his kind and still young. The elders predicted that he'd hit puberty in another 10 years and a growth spurt with it. The Bay wouldn't be able to hold him then. The hope was he'd transform then, lay eggs and leave, like his kind do. They'd take care of feeding and caring for the next hatchling, more than likely just one of the 3 eggs to survive, much like he himself. It wasn't known what happened to them when they left, whether they meet up or if they just swam out into the vast ocean until the darkest trench claimed them. It was fun to a point to speculate, but no one ever investigated. They just did what they had to do and moved on. Nothing like this had ever happened before. The threat of occupiers who didn't care to know. The new world that held no beliefs in anything but themselves in their moment. A human falling in love with one of them, and most certainly not the sentiments being returned. I've got some good parts for the thing I built. We should come up with a name for it, Nettie mumbled as she picked it through. She avoided looking at him, had been since sitting down after her initial greeting of a small headbutt to his massive philtrum. A burst of thick, wet air hit her like a foghorn, and she fell back, her crossed legs flailing as she clawed at rocks for purchase. The fuck, Wani? I just washed my hair 3 days ago. You know how hard it is to get Grammy to my shit, and here you go fucking it up with your hot ass breath? She continued mumbling as she wrung out the frizzed strands of her natural hair. Ignoring the scraping of her voice against his sensitive ears, she snorted again, this time completely soaking her from head to foot in viscous fluids. Her kaiju had snot rocketed on her. Nettie squealed, stomping her frustration and disgust from foot to foot in a jittery dance. Fucking gross, Wani. He raised up, threatening to do it again until she glared at him, pointing a finger. Don't you fucking dare. His second lid blinked wetly at her as he settled back into the water. He eased backwards, giving her some room as she continued to eye him. He then nodded, sending harder waves to the shore, lapping them at her sneakered feet. She softened. I can't swim with you tonight. It's too cold. She snorted into the water, creating bubbles before lifting and spraying enough to rinse her jeans. She squealed again, shivers settling in necks. Keep it up, or I'll have to head home early. He stopped then, pulling back further and settling deeper into the water until only the very tops of his eyes could be seen. Oh God, Grammy's gonna kill me, she groaned, swiping at her box braids. It wasn't as bad as she thought, but bad enough that she would have to rinse her hair, more than likely drying it out. Fuck it, I'll say I needed a trim, take it all down and have Katura do it for me. She knew he wasn't really listening at this point, but she needed to keep talking about idle things, tiny things that hardly mattered, not when it felt like her entire city was starting to explode. He neared her again, soft and silent, until his short snout was brushing rocks aside to nudge her. The nudge was just short of a punch to her middle, and she collapsed onto him, arms spread for an awkward hug. The roughness of his skin never bothered her. She often found it fascinating, the scales that sometimes harbored barnacles and plankton, and even rarer, whole fish. The neighborhood's changing, Wani, she mumbled against him. She was getting colder the longer she embraced his snout. All these white people are moving in, not the kind that help, the kind that yell that they do, but still colonize, the kind who are scared. She sighed and shivered. When does the self-fulfilling prophecy stop and inevitability begin? Ma'am? Ma'am, are you okay? Are you hurt? The flash of an LED light startled the both of them. Annette drew away, her next instinct to fan herself out in front of him hardly effectual, but she did it anyway. His massive head still flanked her, and the low growl emanating from her body solidified in the spotlight. Oh my God, what is that? Oh my God. The scream that followed came from neither of them, but sent both of them scattering for their respective habitats. White people don't know how to blend in nowhere. They always gotta take over, then got the nerve to get mad when shit gets as bland as they are. Nettie and Gertie were standing in front of their new chic restaurant, one that boasted fake bullet holes in a 40-ounce bottle of cheap champagne served in a paper bag for an exorbitant amount of money. The soft opening resulted in terrible reviews of the food and overall atmosphere. Still, people flocked, at least the newer residents did. Those of the old neighborhood curled their lips in disgust and enacted weekly protests. Girl, where is your head at? Nettie started, her whole body jolting as she turned around, frantically looking for her grandmother who had been at her side seconds ago. She spotted her a good 50 feet away, already at the corner. Sorry, Grammy, she hurried towards her, the light changing in their favor. What's wrong with you? Gertie asked softly. Been acting real strange all morning. And I saw that blizzard boy in front of the house last night. He better not have been dropping you off. Nettie smirked. His name is Snow, Grammy, and he was just making sure I was safe. Why? Something happened? Nettie's face fell as they walked into the dollar store. She could feel new eyes on her, questioning eyes, or it may have been her fresh paranoia. Did it? I noticed your hair is a damn mess. I ain't tugging at them naps for you, girl, Gertie warned. Nah, Katura said I needed a trim anyway, so I'm gonna go over by her later. Gertie stopped short, narrowing her gaze at Nettie. Matilda Denise, you better tell me what happened last night, and you better not lie to me again, acting like I ain't come through not even a week ago to feel them ends smoother than warm butter. Nettie immediately began to fidget, her eyes stinging and her throat tightening. I, I think I fucked up, Grammy, she said through a strained breath. Gertie suppressed the urge to cup her granddaughter's chubby cheek, her stance hardening. Tell me. They saw us, she sputtered. Last night, he was out of the water, head kind of high, and they saw. They who? Nettie's shoulders fell, but she held back the smart-ass response. Them, Granny. Grammy. Ew, Tilly. Both women turned to see Couture rushing towards them, her nephew on her wide hip, dark-skinned flush. Mad cops is down by the bay. Somebody said they looking for your boy. Some white lady lost her fucking mind, talking about some big-ass alligator or some shit. Y'all might need to step back for a while. Couture took a breath and said, Hey, Miss Gertrude, how you doing? Nah, I ain't so damn sure how I'm doing, Gertie said. They say anything else? They looking for anybody? Couture shook her head. Not that I heard, just an alligator. Okay, thank you, young lady. Y'all okay? How your sister doing? Couture shook her head, her chin dimpling for a moment. Within the next moment, she took it off and straightened her back. She aight, they treating her okay. Good. You writing her? It gets lonely in there. Don't forget to write her. I am Miss Gertrude, promise. Okay, good. Be on now. And tell your grandmother to stop. Tell your mother to stop by some damn time. She owed me her auntie's pound cake recipe. Couture giggled. Yes, ma'am. It wasn't until after Couture left that Nettie took a shaky breath. Oh shit, Grammy, calm down, girl. You ain't do a damn thing wrong, Gertie said. It was bound to happen. Now come on. We need to talk to your father, see what we gotta do. Lay low. That was it. It was all they could do. They couldn't draw attention to themselves or to the bay. The bay was dry for 12 hours the first day and patrolled since then. No communication, so Howard had Nettie strategically disassemble the communication device, ensuring no transmission could occur, but allowing her fast reassembly when the coast was clear. So, stay low. Nettie visited once, maybe twice a week normally, but something about being forbidden from him, especially at such a crucial time, it was excruciating. On the third day, they were to attend the funeral of Estelle Dubois, the procession of which would double as an official Black Lives Matter march. Permits were approved with hours left, but the neighborhood was ready. While Nettie's assessment at the dinner table had been uncouth, it wasn't entirely inaccurate. Estelle had a fresh mouth with a sharp tongue and loose eyeballs on top of it. She rubbed plenty the wrong way, but none of that truly mattered. The neighborhood let her be, and she kept mostly to herself and her core family, which had expanded to her baby girl in recent months. She was mostly quiet when she wasn't bothered. Some speculated more was going on with her, maybe depression or some other mental illness. But in the end, none of it mattered. It started with an accusation and ended with an immediate execution. She wore the cloak of societal guilt before even opening her smart-ass mouth that day in Manny's bodega on the corner of Cambridge and Vine, her skin. And now her daughter would be raised without a mother, in a fog of grief she herself would never quite understand. Ayo, you sure you're all right? Hannibal asked as he stepped into his sister's room. Nettie jumped within her skin, but nodded immediately. Nervous? Hannibal poked. Again, Nettie nodded, her top teeth worrying but her bottom lip. She, Gertie, and Howard kept the situation amongst themselves. Though neither were as close as Nettie, Gertie and Howard knew Angela and Hannibal would never quite understand the bond between a communicator and their kaiju. Go ahead, she whispered. She cleared her throat, smoothed her hands over her black skinny jeans. Before running out of the door, she would slip on a black hoodie with the Black Lives Matter on the front, logo on the front, Estelle's hashtag name on the back. Her brother would mirror her in dress as well, just like the projected hundreds of protesters who were to join them. I'll be right down. Her voice was a bit stronger, although it still shook. Hannibal stared at her a moment longer, expression open and searching. They had a bond most twins did, but lately they'd been growing apart. Neither questioned it when they, neither questioned it when they undoubtedly had each other's backs. Still, Hannibal worried for his little sister by 4 minutes. He said, don't take too long. Ma's already being extra. Nettie rolled her eyes and Hannibal snorted a laugh. I'm sure. Just tell her I have my period or some shit. Hannibal scrunched up his face. Way too much info. Goodbye, Hannibal, Nettie insisted. Hannibal waved her off and skipped down the hallway, the front door to the apartment slamming closed behind him. Nettie wanted to go after him, but she stood in front of her window, an arm wrapped around her middle as she tried to will her dread away. But it had taken root in the center of her chest, constricted her breathing, setting her face ablaze. She sat down on her bed and tucked her legs up, hugging her knees to her chin. It's okay. It'll blow over in a few days. People will move on if they haven't already, she changed to herself, much like she had for the last 3 days. The dread only grew. Fuck it. She stood up in one swift movement, her toe knocking into something as she rummaged through her closet for black leather Timberlands. Frowning, she knelt down and pulled out a hunk of metal, her radio. The very first one she'd created to talk to him, her Wani, before she understood that he'd heard her. Always. He'd indulged her, though, allowed her to communicate this way so he could respond in kind. They barely needed devices now, since she saw him so often, used to see him so often. The once or twice a week were the official times. There had been others, like after school in winter, since the sun was set so early, or during summer when the curfews were lax and her friends knew she was safe. She saw her Wani as often as she could, so this was torture. Relief and panic flooded her at once as she scrambled to her desk. The muscle memory fell into place as she reconnected the wire and adjusted the headset. One message, that's all. Just to let him know she was okay, that this would be over soon, and she'd be back. She turned the dial and was immediately assaulted by what most would mistake for as whale songs. He'd been crying for her this whole time, waiting, not understanding what had happened. Her eyes stung as she listened. She couldn't decipher most of it, but the lilt of those notes tore at her. Okay, real quick, let me just. But her bravado failed her for a moment. She popped a sob. He missed her, much like she'd missed him. And so, placing her fingers on the straight key, she began tapping out a message. What took you so long? Angela snapped as she watched her daughter skip down the front stoop. I thought I got my period, Nettie said, smiling hard. Angela eyed her daughter suspiciously. While the condition would explain her mood shift in the last few days, it sure as hell wouldn't explain the moody expression on her face now. If she was late, that was a problem. If she wasn't, Nettie was prone to whining, baby-like behavior, usually up under everyone seeking pity. While the pity was well-deserved, Nettie tended to push the boundary of decency when explaining her plight, and she loved explaining her plight. Stop it, Mom, fine, Nettie said with a giggle. She even planted a kiss on Angela's cheek, setting off more alarms. Promise. Angela decided to let it go, considering what the day itself would entail. She was going to allow her daughter whatever bit of happiness she could find, and keep an eye on her while she was at it. You okay, Grammy? Hell no, girl, this back is killing me, Gertie said, placing a hand on her lower back to emphasize. The cane wasn't doing shit to relieve the pressure, but her grandmother slipping her arm around her helped a little more than a little bit. I'm going to head back, start on dinner. You sure? You want me to come up with you? But Gertie was already shaking her head. It was a beautiful service, but I can't do no protest. Shout loud and proud for me, girl. Nettie beamed down at her grandmother. Will do. Gertie hugged her granddoll a little tighter and longer than usual. Nettie tensed a bit at first, but then allowed it, planting a large smack of a kiss to her smooth cheek. They let go, and Gertie started off without another word. When she was almost out of range, Nettie shouted, "Make something good, old lady." By the time Gertie turned around to cuss her a little insolent ass out, Nettie had been swallowed up by the crowd of black on black. That dread had returned, this time a bit different, but it was just as heavy, just as breathtaking. Nettie had fucked up. She wasn't sure how yet, but she felt in her chest that last transmission was pushing what little luck she had left. But still she marched, hollered for Estelle, for those she didn't know, for herself, for her future. She raised her fist in the darkening sky and she yelled along with her neighbors, who were desperate for change, desperate for a chance to be human, to be seen as such, to be treated as such within their lifetime. She cried for the present. At the end of the route, the crowds dispersed into huddles of planning. Sign-up sheets were going around volunteering for the next round and for the next round of protests. The vibe was electrified, emotional, yet filled with hope. Nettie smiled until she saw Snow running straight for her, his pale face flushed with exertion and stained. The closer he got, the more she recognized the dark smears of soot. They'd heard sirens nearly an hour ago, but they kept going, pushing forward. Nettie wished she'd gone back. She wished she'd walked with Gertie instead of stayed and had insisted to stay with her. Maybe make her lie down and make her a snack, start on dinner, watch television, anything. She should have been there. Ayo, Tilly, they raised y'all's building, Snow said breathlessly. His eyes flicked about him as he watched his crew inform others of the news. Murmurs came alive as the crowd closed in. Wait, what? She screeched, calling attention to a few others surrounding them. And the next moment, Hannibal was at her side, with Angela and Howard hustling towards them. The cops, they had some bogus warning, wanted to search the place for a radio or some shit, he said, sounding much more collected. Said there was some kind of suspicious transmission. Grammy. Nettie rushed. What about Grammy? They burned the building, Tilly, Snow explained, hoping he didn't have to say the words. They fucked up, tear gassed the fuck out of the spot, and one of them hit Prissy's heater, Priscilla, their downstairs neighbor who was always cold. The whole shit is gone, Tilly. The whole block burning. Young man, explain this to me, Howard said, stepping forward and grabbing the front of Snow's hoodie in a clenched fist. Where is Gertrude? Snow grit his jaw, letting himself be humiliated. He said, She's gone, Mr. Innocent. She didn't make it out. Nobody did. Howard's fist loosened in time for him to catch his wife as she fell unconscious. Next to Nettie, Hannibal clenched his fist. You saying everything is gone? Hannibal pressed, shifting from one foot to the other. Snow nodded, his body language mirroring Hannibal's. I don't know about y'all, but I'm about tired of this shit. The crowd quieted to see Elder Ewan hobble towards them, adorned all in white. The only two who didn't were Nettie and Howard, the latter of whom was still clinging to Angela. We can't even go to the corner store without being accused, tried, and executed for some shit. Now Gertie's paying the same price? Ewan snorted and shook her head. A 78-year-old woman they probably didn't even see. Fuck 'em. Her blue ringed eyes flickered over to Nettie. Call him. Nettie's jaw loosened, her tongue lolling for protestation that wouldn't come. We'll be all right. We know these parts. They don't. We've been rebuilding since Tulsa and Rosewood. We can do it again. Call him. It's time we used our own executioner. Without another word, Nettie stepped off, breaking into a full-on run towards the bay. They were more than communicators. They were caretakers. They were creators, lovers, families, friends. They were a people unto their own, a people forced to make do with what could be taken. They were protectors, they were keepers, and tonight they would be destroyers. Matilda ran as fast as her legs could carry her, her lungs on fire as the cool air snatched at reserves, hardly having time to replenish her. She felt the neighborhood at her back, heard Snow calling for folks, smelled the smoke, the char of burnt flesh, of lost hope, of dead generations. Or it may have been just her imagination. Her gulch threatened to singe the back of her throat as tears blurred her eyes. Yet still she pushed. She ran until her Timbs crunched glass, kicked rocks, slapped the waiting shore. Only then did she stop, hands on knees, mouth gaping, sucking at the air for a steady breath that sobs wouldn't let her claim. In all her years, never once had she cried like this. Never had she been lost like this. But as waters ran towards her, engulfing her boots, climbing up the darkness of her jeans until she was waist deep in the adjusting shoreline, she realized just how much she was set to gain. A low growl hit deep within her belly, and she held her hand there, the smile slow and sad. They killed Grammy, she whispered. The water shifted again, a soft whine piercing the air loud enough to make Nettie's neck twitch as she winced. The whine eased into an open throat groan, oddly melodic, filled with pain. Felt her knees give way and she collapsed into the shadow pool, head submerged, body colliding with the rough patch of scales, barnacle shells, and the ever so rare whole fish. A catfish this time. As Nettie felt the chill of the night air against her skin once more, she rescued it, pulling it off from the clutches of Wani's skin and tossing it below. Below became farther and farther away as Nettie's belly crawled to the edge of Wani's snout. 4 stories, 7, 10. She held onto the curve of his nostril, her nails digging in deep, her grip secure. Her Wani had grown since the summer, since they last gone night swimming together. Even then, he hadn't stood tall like now. 15, 22, 27. Still they climbed, as if in slow motion, the air singing around her as wind hit his scales and other detritus. She was reminded of her father's job, the one before last, the one with the view of the world from its windows. She felt on top of it all then, had gaped at how tiny the people all their problems had become. She thought of her Wani. Is this what he thought of them, insignificant in their fickle struggles, inconsequential to anything outside of their moments? 33, 34. Their ascent slowed. A moment later, Nettie could hear the distant rhythmic thud of a helicopter. No, several helicopters coming their way. The music of her lullabies as a child. The big bad monsters coming to tear apart another home. Except this time, Nettie was the monster. Wani was the monster, and they were ready to tear it all down. Wani stiffened and popped one short squawk. Immediately, Nettie scrambled backwards, carefully gripping his skin before scraping forward until she was set against the top of his skull. Her hands were cut up and bleeding, making her hold slippery, but she tried her damnedest to hold on as Wani stepped forward, one arm swiping at the clouds above them, colliding with 2 of the 3 helicopters. There were no explosions like the movies, just ear-scraping sound of crunched metal, the stink of exhaust and gasoline, the faint cries of 4 men falling into the dark waters below. Wani swung around, his other arm smacking the last of the first fleet into the watery oblivion. Wani stepped forward, and for the first time since he hatched and swam to shore, since the first time he'd met Nettie. Nettie liked to think he'd fallen for the city much like he'd fallen for her, but she knew that couldn't be true. Their tradition revolved around secrecy. What kind of life was one lived in the shadows, alone without warmth of family of your own kind? Nothing could have prepared her for the movement. Nettie crouched as when he stepped again, his left foot grinding the empty buildings that had shielded him into dust. Sure, she had ridden on his head during those forbidden swims, during deep under the night sky, but they'd just crest the surface as she held on, cackling with glee as she glided along. This was unsteady and unpredictable as his weight shifted, compensated for the deliberate destruction of a neighborhood that held her people captive for generations, a neighborhood they'd turned into a home, a neighborhood being stolen from them, brownstone by brownstone, block by block. And now they were taking it back, if only by leaving rubble in their wake. Wani was careful, concentrating on makeshift blockades, kicking objects with lights flashing so bright the slit of his pupils tightened the blade of black. He let out another squawk and let him lay flat, face down into the sea-swelling smell of his flesh as he swooped down, laying waste to Manny's bodega, Estelle's apartment building, and 3 of Snow's cars. Everyone who mattered were well on their way by then, carrying only what they had in their hands, much like the pilgrimage generations before them. They would settle, they would be fine, just as Elder Yulin had said. Wani just made sure they were never truly forgotten. I feel kind of bad. There's like a little bit left. Should I continue? Okay, cool. All right. The city's artillery was no match for Wani's evolution. His hide ate the impact of AR-15s, brushed off cannon-projected tear gas and flashbangs. He ignored it all, did what he was taught with care, with consideration, though they deserved none. By the time emergency state marshals moved in, Wani was heading back to shore, his back to the destruction. It was then they struck, hitting him square between the shoulders with a missile meant for buildings. It hit him like a punch, and he dove forward, shocking both himself and Nettie. Nettie felt his surface give way, her arms and legs flailing for purchase, her breath stolen. Wani wailed after her, his eyes widening in panic as his maw opened wide. Nettie wanted to protest, wanted to give him a sharp no, but her choice was stolen from her as she headed straight for the abyss of Wani's throat. The thick blackness closed around her, and still she fell. The stench of rotted fish and aged salt making her gag. She landed with a thud against the spiked roughness of his tongue. The sea of bugs grasped at her, bulbs the size of lampposts in her neighborhood swaying and splitting as she slid further and further into darkness. Finally, she grabbed the fatter bud, her body swinging around it as her momentum continued. She was lathered in spit, but she had no time to be disgusted. The sounds of the sea crashed around her, small buckets of it splashing towards her, washing over her. Pressure began to build in her head, her ears muffling too fast for any bit of swallowing to make a difference. A sharp pain jabbed both of them, and she could hear again with the agony nearly unbearable. She screamed, and the world halted, if only for a second, the pressure in her head easing. A mournful whimper vibrated around her, and she nestled deeper into the buds, taking hold of the root of the one she clutched. There she felt warm, comforted, held. Nettie passed out. When she awoke, there were people standing over her, smiles on their painted faces and long spears in their fists. One hand extended, the other a bowl of water. Nettie took both, then promptly passed out again. Next time she opened her eyes, she was lying in a hammock, swaying gently with the evening breeze. It was warm wherever she was, tropical if she dared assume. By the look of the bay, she was not wrong. Blue-green waters, slate-gray plateaus with overgrown moss-like forests, and massive raptor-like birds cawing as they flew overhead. On one massive ape sitting impatiently amongst it all, watching her, waiting. Next to it, her Wani, and behind him, his kind, two of them, smaller, but still his. They all watched her. They all waited. In the coming days, Nettie would find her strength through the meals provided by the tribe, first by the tribe, then hunted by her. They communicated in rudimentary ways, all giving way to her leadership, her Wani. She came to know the names of the others, Gojira, Manila, Kong. They would come to know her, respect her, listen to her, because war was set to come, and this time they were staying. And that's it.
Wow, thank you. Phoebe, Zen, thank you both very much. These have been very powerful stories. I had to go get a soft toy. Next week's also going to be excellent. We have someone excellent every week, and next week it's going to be Elon Haber and Sherry Paul. I do recommend checking Story Hour 2020 the day of, just in case there are any changes. And it's also a good place to plan ahead, keep up to date on upcoming authors. And you can always go to the Story Hour page on Facebook to watch any story hours that you may have missed, or watch your favorites a few more times. So thank you both so much, Phoebe and Zen. Thank you to my co-host, Daniel Marcus, for giving us Story Hour in the first place. And all of you joining us here tonight on Facebook and on Zoom, thank you. And all of you watching it later, thank you too. You're all part of Story Hour. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you for having me.